Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with grilled coffee cola skirt steak. That's right, of course coffee and cola are great beverages, but as I discovered, they make an incredibly delicious marinade for grilled meat. And not just any grilled meat, we're doing skirt steak, which is by far the juiciest and most flavorful piece of beef you can put on a grill. So step one here, we're going to make the aforementioned marinade, which starts off with a couple cloves of minced garlic. To that, I'm going to add a little bit of ketchup. We're going to add some freshly ground black pepper. We're also going to add some salt and some dried rosemary. Now, of course, you could use fresh rosemary, but I do like the dry better for this. Not exactly sure why. I'm also going to add some hot sauce. I'm using Louisiana hot sauce, but I think a hot sauce from any state would work. I'm also going to add a splash of rice vinegar, and then the co-stars of the marinade, some strong coffee, and a bottle of cola. And you can use any cola you want as long as it's not diet. We need the sugar, so do not use diet. If you use diet cola, I can no longer consider you a friend. So we're just going to dump all that into a bowl. We're going to take a whisk and we're going to mix it up, and that marinade is done. All right, so very easy. So we're going to mix that up, set that aside while we prep our skirt steak. And here it is. This long, thin strip of marvelously marbled meat is called a skirt steak by butchers who think it looks like a skirt. Butchers obviously don't get out much because it looks much more like a scarf steak or a sash steak than a skirt steak. But anyway, it's too late. They already named it. So we're going to unroll our skirt steak, and you can clearly see the way the grain of the meat's running. So later when this is done, we're going to want to cut across that. And we're going to cut it up into smaller pieces, which is going to make it much easier to grill and, as you'll see later, cut. So we're going to take our scissors and cut it every 6 inches or so. And of course, we're using scissors because it's a skirt steak. That, and I didn't want to dirty a cutting board. So we're going to cut that up. Here we'll cut that little end piece off and trim a little fat. And then we're going to go ahead and place that into our coffee cola marinade, making sure it's totally submerged. If you were thinking you could get away with partial submersion, you're wrong. Make sure they're all immersed. And then we'll take a piece of plastic wrap, push that down on top. And that meat is going to marinate overnight. So I'll give the official time frame is 8 to 12 hours. So I say it's overnight, but you could totally do this early in the morning and then grill later that afternoon. So regardless, 8 to 12 hours later, we're going to pull that out. We're going to pull it out of the marinade, which you are not throwing away, by the way. Reserve the marinade. So we're going to pull out that meat. We're going to put it on a plate. And then please take a paper towel and pat this dry. We do not want to season wet meat. And then we'll just leave that there while we dump our marinade into a saucepan. Because one optional step that I'm going to make mandatory is that you reduce this on medium heat until it thickens up slightly, kind of down to a glaze. We don't want it super thick and syrupy. So something like that. And we're not going to use this to brush on the meat. It doesn't need it. But what we will do is drizzle this over after we slice it. And it really does make an incredibly flavorful sauce, as you'll see. And by the way, this meat grills pretty fast, so I usually will reduce that before I go out to the grill. But that's just me. And then we're going to go back to the meat, which, like I said, has been patted thoroughly dry. I am going to season both sides lightly with salt and cayenne. And then we're going to head out back where I have a very hot charcoal fire. All right, very mature. You see the white hot coals glowing red. And I'm going to grill that for approximately 4 minutes per side or until it's a perfect pink. And because of the sugar in that cola in the marinade, you are going to get nice dark golden brown to golden black grill marks. All right, you want those, all part of the show. And at this point, let me give you a few skirt steak grilling tips. Number one, if you have a piece that's thin at one end and thicker at the other, if you think that thin end is done, simply lay that end of the meat over another piece, which will insulate it from the direct heat, and that thicker end will finish cooking and the thin end won't be overcooked. Also, if you're afraid of it getting too dark, you can always move it away from the hottest part of the flame. So I kind of moved mine off to the side here. And then last but not least, skirt steak has a great built-in indicator for when it's perfectly pink. The surface will start to get shiny and look wet as moisture from the inside is forced up to the surface. This is an indication the center is just about medium rare to medium, which is how I think skirt steak should be eaten. I'll explain on the blog post why I don't think skirt steak should be cooked rare. But when you see that sheen on the top and it looks like it's getting a little wet, that for me is the sign to pull it off. And of course, yes, you can use a thermometer or go by feel, but for me, that always works. But anyway, at this point, my meat was done. I'm going to pull it off the grill, and we're going to take that inside, of course, and let it rest for at least 5 minutes. This is critical with most meats off the grill, but especially something as juicy as skirt steak. So let it sit for 5 minutes, and then, of course, you're going to go ahead and slice it across the grain. All right, the muscle fibers on skirt steak are very easy to see, so you're going to make sure you're cutting across those just like this. So we're going to slice that up, and you can see just how incredibly juicy and awesome that meat is. I mean, look at that. I didn't even have to taste it to know this was going to be just perfect. So we're going to slice that up. We're going to throw it on a plate. We're going to drizzle over just a little bit of that coffee cola reduction. I did go ahead and strain that. I wanted it to be a little fancy, but you really don't have to, but I did. I served mine with a little bit of coleslaw that I'm going to show you the recipe for soon enough. And that was just a magnificent piece of grilled meat. Just smoky, subtly sweet. The flavors balanced perfectly by the bitterness from the coffee and the grill marks. Just absolutely fantastic. So if you're looking for something a little out of the ordinary this summer, I cannot recommend this marinade enough. And of course, if you're not down with skirt steak, you need to get down. Very easy to cook, incredibly flavorful, with a level of juiciness that has to be experienced to be believed. So I really hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.